Or
I move that the members of the Planning Commission certify, 1, that only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements under Chapter 37, Title 2.2 of the Code of Virginia, and 2, only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered by the commission.
Second.
Thank you. Seconded by Commissioner Hughes. All in favor? That appears to be unanimous with Commissioner Bagley temporarily absent. Thank you. Welcome to the January 2020 meeting for the Planning Commission. Tonight we are considering 2 items for action: an amendment to the Arlington County zoning ordinance regarding Columbia Pike neighborhoods form-based code districts to further clarify when building height and setback requirements are triggered for neighborhood form-based code redevelopment adjacent to R and RA zoned properties. Changes to the Arlington County zoning ordinance to permit establishment of assisted living facilities, independent care living facilities, nursing homes, and continuing care retirement communities in the C3 zoning district to enable their establishment within the Clarendon Revitalization District, and an information item, the recent county resolution to join the Biophilic Cities Network. If you are here to speak on any agenda item, please complete a speaker slip. Speaker slips must be turned in to the Planning Commission clerk, Ms. Johnson, before the item is called. And a reminder to please keep cell phones away from the microphones. At this point, I want to present a commemorative gavel to Commissioner Schroll, our chair for the last year, 2019. I want to thank Commissioner Schroll, James, for his service on the Planning Commission and for his leadership during a very busy year and the start of a period of intense growth and development in the county. We are grateful for your leadership and your continued support going forward.
thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair. It was a pleasure and an honor to serve as the chair last year. I really enjoyed working with all of you here at the dais and obviously with staff. It was a pleasure, Mr. Duffy, to work with you and your staff over the last 12 months. Everybody that we've worked with on CPHD staff and DES and others have been fantastic, and look forward to certainly continuing to work with them on the many things we have coming forward. And Madam Chair, I'm excited to have you leading us this year.
Thank you. With that, Madam Clerk, will you please call the first item?
Our first item for the evening is N-FBC-9, amendment to the Arlington County zoning ordinance on the Columbia Pike neighborhoods form-based code districts. We have Matt Matuzik, our planning staff, to present this item today.
Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Matuzik.
Thank you. Good evening. What I'd like to do as part of this presentation is to give you a broad overview of what triggered this analysis, give you some background information on the neighborhood's form-based code, the site in which we're dealing with, and what this might mean for future redevelopment. There's going to be a lot of terminology that I'm going to cover, and hopefully the graphics help us get through that. And I think the staff report tried to provide a very thorough explanation of the different components of the neighborhood's form-based code for those that might not be as familiar with that document. But really what we wanted to focus on is an assessment that occurred in 2019, the development proposal that kind of initiated this review, and how we're proposing to change it to reflect the conclusions of that analysis. So to provide a very brief overview, the form-based code is an overlay zoning district that applies along the entire Columbia Pike corridor. The exhibit you see on this slide gives you a sense of the 2 form-based codes that are in effect. The first one was initiated in 2003. This represents the darker hatch and is limited to just some of the commercial intersections that has historically existed on the corridor. The second form-based code is depicted in the pink shade and red outline. That includes a much broader geography and was adopted in 2013 to capture all the in-between areas between the commercial nodes and largely occupies multifamily properties. Both of these are reflected on the land use plan, general land use plan. The commercial district is labeled as Note 8, and the neighborhood's form-based code district is labeled as Note 24 that came later. Much of this review was triggered early in 2019 when staff began reviewing a preliminary proposal to utilize that neighborhood's form-based code, the second one, on a small property on the eastern end of the Pike, specifically the Arlington View Terrace, which you can see here in the context of the greater corridor. To give you a better sense of that specific property, it is located at the very southern end of Arlington View and just north of the golf course. We're specifically starting with the existing zoning districts in that neighborhood because it's going to significantly impact the discussion and the reason why we were studying this issue. The property itself is zoned RA 818. However, it is adjacent to R5 and R6 zones to the north and south. In this neighborhood, only specific pockets were identified as eligible to redevelop under the neighborhood's form-based code. So much of the single-family homes that you see in Arlington View could only redevelop utilizing their underlying zoning district. Only the multifamily garden-style apartment complexes and the townhomes were permitted to utilize this tool. One of the things that will become apparent is when the neighborhood's form-based code begins to regulate these properties, which you'll see on the next slide, we begin to see a certain impact that some of the requirements that are in the neighborhood form-based code will apply and impact the redevelopment potential on this property. So looking at that same area, slide 6 gives you a sense of how we've codified the Arlington View Terrace property with respect to some of the key parameters. So this is really the starting point for any redevelopment. Sites that are interested in changing and opting into the form-based code. So basically, in exchange for the additional density they're willing to gain, they have to follow and abide by a very prescriptive set of regulations. In this case, the site is structured in 3 different ways, intentionally respecting the low-density development that is adjacent to it. Starting from the north, and I'll just kind of mouse over it, the orange designation reflects a 3-story townhouse or small apartment configuration. The yellow is a detached or single-family property housing form, and the blue is generally a multifamily housing form. In this case, the property that's being redeveloped represented the southern edges of Arlington View, fronting the golf course. What's interesting to note is that given the constraints found in Arlington View, in addition to codifying this by the different frontages, we've also added a label, which may be difficult to read on this slide, that further limits the height and density on this site to just 4 stories. And this was something very intentional and represented a compromise with the community at the time that we didn't want to exceed some of the development potential given its potential impacts on traffic and parking in the neighborhood. However, given the property and the way it's configured right now on each intersection or each corner of the intersection of Rolfe Street and 14th, which is right here, you can see that the western parcels are very shallow. And as we get into some of the additional requirements that are found in the neighborhood's form-based code, if they were to be applied in this particular instance, the redevelopment potential will be very minimized. So the regulations that we're going to discuss that are being impacted here live in the building envelope standards of the neighborhood's form-based code. This is a very thorough section that not only provides general guidance, but also very site-specific regulations depicting height, use, site layout, and many other aspects of development that essentially represent the agreement we struck with the community when this was being developed in 2012 and 2013. So development properties, as they come in to change their sites, have to be strictly following this set of regulations. Within this section, specifically subsection 402, gets even further in the weeds and introduces something that we call neighborhood manners. And this is something intentionally designed to reflect the higher density that neighborhoods form-based code projects deliver with respect to their adjacent and typically lower density neighbors that are outside of the revitalization district. And the way in which this is accomplished is that when sites are able to go up to 6 stories or even higher, specific requirements are triggered. In this case, we're focusing on the exact zoning and use that occurs on the opposite side of the common lot line when form-based code is not able to be applied. So that way, specific setbacks and building restrictions can be applied. So this gives you a sense of the triggers and the criteria that are involved. In addition to the actual text, we also have a visual exhibit that kind of illustrates what that condition might look like. In this case, we're looking at single family detached parcels, and if redevelopment utilizing the neighborhood's form-based code is adjacent, there's a 20-foot zone in which no buildings can occur, and another 30-foot zone where the initial building segments can only go up to 30 feet. So this initial 50-foot area represents a significant reduction in density as you begin to approach the lower density residential properties. The thing that was highlighted as we began to evaluate the proposal is that the exhibit really focuses on the use that is just outside the revitalization district, while the text itself is very much focused on the zoning that those properties have. And the two didn't exactly speak the same language or were consistent. So when staff started to evaluate this, we wanted to make sure that this wasn't something that applied or was impacting multiple sites, and that it was really just happening here because of the golf course maintaining an R6 zoning. So the staff analysis that I conducted in 2019 not only looked at what does this mean for the entire corridor and any other instances when neighborhoods form-based code projects can be adjacent to those zoning districts, but also went back to the 2012 neighborhoods area plan, which depicted the vision and those early suggestions of what the intent of those setbacks was in the first place. Our initial interpretation was that the treatment was supposed to be consistent between the R and RA districts. You'll see a mixture of those throughout the corridor abutting the neighborhood's revitalization district. The analysis itself, if we look at the entire corridor, and again, the pink area includes the broader geography for the neighborhood's form-based code. We first started to look at all the instances where neighborhoods form-based code sites are adjacent to R and RA zoning districts. So the blue lines give you a sense of where those properties exist. From this point, we then went back to the regulating plan that speaks to how redevelopment needs to occur in each of those instances. So the next few slides kind of give you a sense of what that looks like and what is the actual use of those properties. Are we dealing with additional golf courses or other uses that are non-residential, or are they all occupied by the same use? So starting on the west end, what we call the western sub-area, there were two instances on the south, you can see in the yellow, where that zoning was adjacent to the district, one-family dwellings were present. Moving further east, kind of in the central area, there were several other instances. Again, only one-family dwellings were present in those instances. And finally, in the eastern end, we have a few more, but only on this edge here is where we find this anomaly where redevelopment is adjacent to an R zone property, but the property is not occupied by residential use. So this analysis was very helpful in that it clarified that this site in particular, Arlington View Terrace, and it being adjacent to the golf course was really the only anomaly that we've identified, and therefore potential changes to this text amendment would only impact this site. So to summarize, what we've identified is that a potential tweak to the language could actually help us mirror the exhibit that's currently in the form-based code and to make sure that it was consistent moving forward in terms of providing that clarity. The specific change, which you'll see at the end of the staff report, really uses the same language but kind of restructures it in a way that makes it clear that R districts and RA districts are treated the same way. And we've also added a new segment depicting the potential of a vacant lot, which again might create some gray areas for interpretation. We wanted to make sure those were treated as if they were occupied by a residential use, which is more of a conservative approach that would still trigger those requirements. So again, simply by making those minor tweaks would not only make it consistent between those zoning districts, but also consistent with the exhibit that's already in the form-based code. The review process that took place for this analysis began in early 2019. Once staff was able to get into a good place, we visited the Form-Based Code Advisory Working Group in July. We've also met with the Zoning Committee in October. Both groups expressed general support for the amendment. And in December, we were successful in advertising the potential changes. Therefore, staff recommends the adoption of the proposed amendment to the Neighborhoods Form-Based Code. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Matusek. Madam Clerk, have we any public speakers on this item? Thank you. In the absence of any public speakers, are there any commissions that wish to be heard on this item? Not seeing any. Did this go to Transportation Commission?
No, it did not.
Excellent. Then the discussion is now with the commission. Commissioner Hughes, do we have a report? Commissioner Weir?
Sure. And Commissioner Hughes, I think that the chair looked at you because this went to the advisory working
Indeed.
group. It also went to the zoning committee, which met, as the staff report notes, on October 15th. The committee was very supportive, raised no substantive issues or concerns, and I have no reason other than to move the staff recommended motion.
Thank you. Was there anything in addition for the advisory working group?
Thank you, Commissioner Gearing. No, just as the ZOCO is a committee of the Planning Commission, and the Form-Based Code OG is a technically county manager appointed body to which I happen to serve as chairman. I wanted to make sure the zoning went first. This item was heard by the Form-Based Code OG, many of which were there at the inception of the neighborhoods plan as members, and none of them had any objection to this item. I don't know if any of you all had an opportunity today to review, as staff noted, this is actually necessitated from a proposal for a new building that we will not be seeing in any way, shape, or form. And so I always like to highlight that when I get a chance to, because this change will allow what is otherwise a compact with the community to move forward. And that change will allow the building that AHC is proposing to be built, should they receive the funds necessary through the various funding mechanisms they'll go forward with. Staff did have a meeting with the community about that particular development that I'll note just because it's important and it's related with the community. It was a general support, I would call it, with, of course, as always, the Arlington View neighborhood, for those of you who aren't aware, always has a landlocked issue, and the neighbors expressed a great deal of frustration and concern with that, and specifically the transportation impacts sort of associated with that thing. But generally not opposed to the building itself. So that context being known, there is no objection to this. I think the OG looked at it as a unique one-off and consistent with the general principles of it. And nothing much more on that item to report. No.
Thank you, Commissioners Weir and Hughes, for these reports. Are there any items for discussion? With none, we're ready for motion. Oh, Commissioner Weir.
I would just add, and maybe I'm just trying to beat Commissioner Hughes to the punch here, but this is another opportunity to be reminded that we are waiting on the fulfillment of an easement to build at least a road that emergency services would be able to use, and that easement's going to expire. Just, I don't want colleagues to not be thinking about that.
Thank you. Commissioner Siegel?
So I was wondering if Mr. Matusek had anything to say about the concern that's been expressed. I know the county manager did send out, either it was an email or it was a statement that I read, and I forget exactly the import of it. He expressed less concern than we have about the expiration of the ability to build the road out to at least allow emergency services.
I do not have any updates on the easement aspect of it.
Okay.
Are there any other questions or comments on this? I would like to ask that we can get an update on the easement aspect. Is that something that you can follow up on for us, Mr. Matusek, or should we ask it of Mr. Duffy during the staff report?
I can certainly follow up.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Hughes?
Commissioner Gearing, as all of you know who've known me on this ever since becoming aware, the easement at the back of the Arlington View neighborhood that connects Arlington View via pedestrians, bike, and of course, emergency egress and school buses technically, that would cut through the Arlington National Cemetery and connect it with the Pentagon City area under 395 is incredibly important to the Pike. And I intend to, at the CIP, actually further inform my colleagues and give you more read ahead, but ask for a sense of the commission vote to ensure that it is present in the CIP and is not continually kicked to the very end of the line, given the incredible investment that's going to be necessary and needed in this Crystal City area. This one should not also be missed in that opportunity. And so I ask commissioners to think ahead on that one, but not for this evening.
An excellent point. Thank you, Commissioner Hughes. And with that, I think we are ready for a motion.
All right. I move that the Planning Commission recommend the County Board adopt the attached ordinance to amend, reenact, and recodify the Arlington County Zoning Ordinance, Article 11.2, CBN-4 FBC, Columbia Pike Neighborhoods Form-Based Code District, Appendix B, to further clarify when building height and setback requirements are triggered for neighborhoods form-based code redevelopments adjacent to R and RA zoned properties.
Second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Schroll. All in favor? The motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr. Matusek. Madam Clerk, can you please call the next item?
Item number 2 is ZOA-200-01. This is an ordinance to amend, reenact, and recodify particular articles in the Arlington County zoning ordinance. We have Nick Rogers and Cliff Hogan to present this item this evening.
Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Rogers and Mr. Hogan.
Madam Chair, Madam Clerk, members of the Commission, thank you so much. We were just in front of you last month with the broader study recommending several changes to our zoning ordinance to modernize and update our standards pertaining to elder care uses. I'm very happy to report that, of course, the board adopted those changes at their December 17th meeting last month. And both to you and to them, we said we'd be coming back with a small patch in January, really focused on Clarendon, and I'm happy to report that this presentation is going to have a lot more pictures and maps than I had last month, and we'll need it because the story has several layers when we talk about development review in Clarendon. On your viewer, you're seeing right here. This is just a simple map that shows in red the outline of the Clarendon Revitalization District that's shown on our general land use plan. In 2006, when the board adopted a new Clarendon sector plan, the boundary that you see here, the plan recommended a number of amendments and other matters to special provisions in order to implement that plan. And the development review keyed on several factors. Here you have the zoning map, and as you can see, the vast majority of the area within the revitalization district is zone C3. We've got, particularly along the southern edge there of 10th Street, we've got some CTH, and a little bit of CO and CR, and of course, last month you'll recall that those two districts were permitted for all of the elder care uses, but we specifically said C3 was not an appropriate district for elder care uses. The purpose and intent of the zoning ordinance really calls on us to utilize that for retail service and commercial. The type of mixed use development that the sector plan envisions doesn't quite match with how C3 is utilized throughout the county, except for here in Clarendon, where Article 9 of the zoning ordinance has special provisions for mixed-use development of up to 3.0 FAR within C3 districts, so long as you're within the Clarendon Revitalization District. Those special provisions also key off the land use designation on the general land use plan. You're seeing that on your viewer here. It is a bit difficult, and I apologize for the coloring there, but that light purple, the medium density mixed use, So long as the property is zone Z3, and with that medium-density mixed-use designation, that unlocks those special provisions for an applicant, or in this case, an elder care provider. I've also highlighted the service commercial designation, and again, you see that along the southern edge of 10th Street, east of Fillmore Street there. The zoning ordinance calls on an alternative tool to implement the sector plan in those areas. That's our urban commercial mixed use development use permit. Those special provisions are in Article 10 of our zoning ordinance, but much of the design standards, standards for placement of parking and landscaping mirror that. They, of course, implement the sector plan guidance, but they mirror what's in Article 9 for those special site plan provisions. And so as we originally, candidly, as we approached this, when we were finishing up the December staff report, we knew we needed to solve for C3, for Clarendon in particular, but as we furthered that study, we also wanted to include those service commercial areas you're seeing here that use the UCMUD tool. Fortunately, after some consultation with the zoning administrator, we knew that we hadn't excluded elder care uses from Clarendon. It just wasn't as clear as we would prefer. And what I mean by that is taking a look at this use mix map that was originally in the sector plan, when the Clarendon sector plan was implemented and those recommendations incorporated in our zoning ordinance, we included this use mix map here in section 9.2 of the zoning ordinance. And I've called out the 4 different designations on this use mix map that allow for residential uses. And so in any district, in any, I want to make sure I'm not mixing my terminology, in any of the areas that the use mix map permits residential uses, elder care uses would be permitted, but it wasn't as clear as we would prefer. And as we spoke to you last month, one of the real challenges with our previous terminology in the previous zoning ordinance was there was a real lack of clarity in where an assisted living facility or a nursing facility or independent living could go. And so what we've done is, per the language, thank you once again, Madam Clerk, for circulating that revised language, which we feel improves upon the version that was circulated in your staff report last week. We've recommended several changes. The first is adding elder care uses to the use table, but with some specific call-outs to which districts they would be permitted in within the Clarendon Revitalization District. It is a bit complex and verbose, but we've used this in several parts of the zoning ordinance to make differentiations when we're calling upon special provisions, particularly from the GLUP. We've also introduced references directly into the text, so that anyone who's examining that text can be very clear in that elder care uses are permitted in those districts. And then we've also made some adjustments to those use standards in Article 12 to signify that with that UCMUD tool, which is a use permit that's approved by the county board, we want to make sure that those criteria and findings are applicable to all special exceptions, not just site plans. And so we've added some broadening language there as well. A lot of different moving parts, but it does achieve the goal that we spoke of last week to clarify that elder care uses are a permitted use within one of our urban villages here in Arlington. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rogers, Mr. Hogan. Are there any public speakers for this item? Thank you. Are there any commissions that wish to weigh in on this item? Did this come to the Transportation Commission?
No, it did not.
Thank you. With that, we're ready for the ZOCO report. Commissioner Ware?
So there really isn't a ZOCO report on this. It did not come to the zoning committee, but that said, Mr. Rogers characterized it as a patch. I think that's exactly right. Anyone with any software development experience might call it a dot release or a point release. and it's, we should support it.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on this item within the commission? Questions? Commissioner Schwalb? Okay. Yes, Commissioner Siegel.
I just compliment you on the work, on the vision, the need to express clearly through the technical language, UCMUD, et cetera, which is a handy tool, but also in plain language to invite providers for elder care. So I applaud this. I think this is a good example of ensuring that county values are included in the zoning ordinance.
An excellent point, Commissioner Siegel, and I agree with that. And also, thank you again for another excellent zoning report. Commissioner Schroll?
Yeah, just a quick question. Mr. Rogers, you mentioned that you added kind of the further clarification in the table in Article 7 of the reference to the Clarendon Revitalization District on the GLUP. Are there other instances where we specifically mention kind of GLUP notes or GLUP designations in the zoning ordinance like that, that are referenced in this way? And I guess, is it just sort of a belt and suspenders approach where we really want to ensure that people understand it? Because you do reference the section under the use standards.
It's not a tool that we use frequently. We try to be, as Commissioner Siegel mentioned, as plain and clear as possible, but is it a tool that we use on unique, rare occasions? The one example that does come to mind is that we have some specific call-outs in the residential use table for townhouse development, either within an HCD or outside of an HCD. I think that's the one that comes to mind.
Okay.
That's the most obvious example I can come up with, Commissioner Scholl.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with it. I was just wondering where else we use it, and I would concur with my colleagues that well done, nice catch by you all, and I'm in support of expanding the UCMUDs. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Peterson?
I agree that it's fantastic that we are expanding opportunities for elderly care facilities in Arlington. And I also just wanted to note that this is one of the more expensive areas of Arlington. So probably the projects that might be built here might be on the higher end of affordability. So I was wondering if there are other opportunities in Arlington to do similar rezoning so that we could get even more projects like this that might be a little bit more affordable.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Commissioner Siegel?
Not to expand the scope of this discussion too much, but the issue of affordability came up when we were doing the Artists Senior Living Program, and it comes up here. I guess I just make a comment rather than put you on the spot, because I know this isn't your focus now, or maybe you are participating, but the Housing Arlington equity principles. Hopefully, those will, as they become more articulated and unfold, will deal with these kinds of facilities or quasi-facilities, and so that we have an equity portfolio that includes all kinds of uses and functions. That's just my comment.
Thank you for raising that point. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we're ready for a motion.
I move that the Planning Commission recommend that the county board adopt the ordinance attached to ZOA 20201 staff report to amend, reenact, and recodify Articles 7, 9, and 10 of the Arlington County zoning ordinance to clarify the development review standards for elder care uses within the Clarendon Revitalization District on the general land use plan in 1, the C3 zoning district on lots designated as medium density mixed use with site plan approval, and 2, the C1, C2, C3, and CTH zoning districts on lots designated as service commercial with unified commercial mixed use development approval.
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Ware and seconded by Commissioner
Madam
Schroll.
Chair. Oh, that was a lot louder than I thought it was going to be. I'm very sorry.
Yes, Mr. Rogers.
In Commissioner Weir's motion, he mentions changes in the text included in your staff report to Articles 7, 9, and 10. It may be, if it pleases the commission, to reference the revised language that was circulated earlier this evening, that more improved text that also includes Article 12. That would be perhaps reflective of your recommendation.
So I would seek unanimous consent to include Article 12 in the seconded motion.
Without objection.
Without objection, the language is modified. Thank you. Again, a motion made by Commissioner Weir, seconded by Commissioner Schroll. Is there any discussion or amendment? Okay, with none, we're ready for a vote. All in favor? This motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr. Rogers, Mr. Hogan. Madam Clerk, can you please call the next item?
Item number 3 is an informational item only. It is on the biophilic cities. We have Jennifer Fioretti to present this item from the Department of Public Works. I'm sorry, Parks and Recreation. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Before we get started, I want to say a few things, and I want to invite Commissioners Haynes and Howell to have a seat up on the table in the front. Thank you. This is an informational item, Biophilic Cities. I was involved with this, so I'm going to take a moment to introduce it. Biophilia is the idea that people co-evolve with nature, and thus we have an intrinsic need to connect with it. There's an immense amount and a growing amount of broad global scholarship that documents the many physical and mental health benefits, as well as social, economic, and other benefits that nature provides to people. This is critical for planners as more and more people are coming to live in urban areas where they're separated from regular access to nature. And addressing this need for it and finding ways to provide ways to access it becomes more vital, and it demands creative approaches. How can people in urban areas satisfy their need to connect with nature? How can planners and policymakers provide for nature in an increasingly urban environment? How do we make this a provision given competing resources? And given the documentation of nature's benefits, do we have an ethical responsibility to provide for accessible nature in the community? The recently revised Public Spaces Master Plan included over 200 recommendations, including having Arlington County join the Biophilic Cities Network. And this membership will help us as a community explore creative ways to bring nature into our built environment in ways that we can connect people with nature on a regular basis. Big efforts like urban parks and small efforts like green walls all help transform our regular experiences and improve the health, happiness, and wealth of our community. Over the past several years, several of us who were involved in the Public Spaces Master Plan update were also very involved in advancing this conversation around this recommendation with staff and with the public at large. Myself, but also Commissioner Caroline Haynes and Commissioner David Howell. And I want to thank them for their hard work, creativity, and tireless championing of this very important issue. And with that, I would like to welcome staff. Welcome Ms. Fioretti and Ms. Lazick. Before we hear your report, for anyone listening at home, in addition to the staff reports, we may sometimes hear from representatives of related public planning processes, including representatives of the appointed commissions involved in these processes. However, the Planning Commission does not hear public speakers for informational items. There's nothing before us on which to act, hence we engage in a very limited and focused discussion. But if you feel strongly, please feel free to write to staff and/or the Planning Commission regarding this item. And with that, we would love to hear your presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Guerin, and members of the Planning Commission. In addition, Irina Lesick and Mr. Duffy both will be here to answer questions at the end of the presentation. So, as Ms. Guerin had said, this is a huge movement, one where we are looking at connecting people with nature. And as our community continues to urbanize, it becomes increasingly important that we have access to nature as part of our daily lives, not just once a day or a trip to the zoo. It has to be something that you see and experience regularly. With this in mind, the Biophilic Cities project was initiated at the University of Virginia in 2011. The project builds on the important concept of this human-nature connection, that we have this evolutionary affinity for wanting to be with nature. And the work, of course, is based on scientific research that shows this connection with nature is essential to human health and well-being. It helps reduce stress, it improves your mood, it enhances cognitive abilities as well. We are likelier, healthier, and happier and more productive with nature around us. A biophilic city, then, is one with abundant biodiversity that not only conserves nature, it creates new forms of nature, placing it at the core of its design and planning, creating opportunities for people to learn and connect with nature. The Biophilic City Network, since 2013, has been working to slowly grow its partners. Here we have 22 partners, and hopefully Arlington will be the 23rd to join the network. And as you can see, they're from around the world. As a partner, Arlington would have access to the network of cities already doing this work and their ideas and best practices solutions. So considering joining the Biophilic Cities Network and incorporating the principles, as Ms. Guerin had mentioned, was part of the board-adopted recommendations in the PSMP and also the Community Energy Plan. So we're going to walk you through a little bit about the 14 patterns of biophilic design. So what we're trying to do is integrate the biophilic concepts into the built environment. So how do we do that? First, we look at these 3 sections of biophilic design: nature in the space, natural analogs, and nature of the space. So before we dive in, I want to emphasize 2 things. One, it's important to look at quality over quantity. So we want to make sure that people have a positive experience when they're connecting with nature, and not just one where they're passing by and they don't even notice it. And then secondly, to also focus on exposure and frequency. So I had mentioned at the beginning of the presentation that it's not just about a trip somewhere once in a while, it's about having regular contact with nature on a daily basis. Science shows that all you need is 5 to 20 minutes of immersion to realize the health benefits. And as part of the presentation, you're going to see a lot of pictures from Arlington. We already utilize various elements of biophilic design, and so we want to kind of walk you through that, but know that there's opportunities to do a lot more. So we'll take the first segment of the biophilic patterns, which is nature in space. So as the name suggests, the idea is really about creating an intervention that has a direct physical, ephemeral presence of nature in the space or place. Here, as you probably recognize, is Penrose Square, where you have the presence of water, which creates a visual and physical connection to nature. Green Roof Tenet Clarendon. And if you haven't had an opportunity to take a look at it, it's really a great place to visit. This not only provides you with a visual connection to nature, but also a non-visual connection to nature. And so in some cases, you don't necessarily have to do something as expansive as this to realize those benefits. You can also have some strategically placed plants indoors. You can have an interior exterior planting scheme or a green roof such as this. From a non-visual perspective, I should point out that you can touch, you can smell, and you can even taste the food. The Rain Garden at Longbridge Park is a good example of non-rhythmic sensory stimuli. So yes, there is a visual connection, there's a non-visual connection, but I'll point out some of the other elements that are associated with the biophilic design patterns. And so this one is the non-rhythmic sensory stimuli. So this is an experience where, as you're walking through the pathways, you can hear the grass swaying. So that brings back that connection. From a low-budget perspective, you could look at bird boxes or squirrel houses in sight. Medium budget would be lights on trees, and then, of course, something like this. The green wall, which is located at 1000 Wilson Boulevard, is an example of thermal airflow variability. And that is which, because of its size, can moderate air temperature, humidity, mimicking the natural environments. And so, of course, it doesn't have to be something as grand as this. It can be just simply having buildings that have opening windows, or covered outdoor spaces, eating areas, and so on. And of course, our tree canopy, the connection with a natural system. It gives you the awareness of natural processes, such as the seasons and temporal changes. And I should point out, though, that if you don't have access to our great resources, then you're not going to have that ability to create that connection. So when we look at connections, we also look at how you get to these places, how you access this environment. So the second category of the biophilic design patterns is natural analogs. And this includes indirect strategies that rely on an analogy of shapes and forms. Examples can also include artwork, organic shaped furniture, and design, architectural design. And so this is a great example of a natural analog. As you can see, you've got the stamped concrete with the flowers and the bridge at Arlington Boulevard. And one of my personal favorites is liquid pixels in Roslyn. So this is an example of a biomorphic pattern. So while it is not an actual running water, when the wind blows against it, it gives you that sense of movement of water. And here, the natural materials and HVAC system used at 2700 South Taylor, so this is at one of our Parks Trades buildings, gives you both a material connection with nature, and it also represents complexity and order. So from the material connection with nature, you have locally sourced materials. This is from the region, and it's exposed, so people have the ability to see the material. And then from a complexity and order standpoint, you're looking at the HVAC system that's exposed, and it has repeating patterns, which are things that occur in nature. So from a low budget standpoint, you can have nature-inspired color inside your buildings. You can have natural materials or structural timber beams, such as this. And then finally, the third category is nature of space. And here, this is an example of how you feel or how you relate in the space. So in this case, you can stand in the library protected, overlooking people playing outside below, and you're safe. That gives you an element of risk, and yet you're still inside. There's that identifiable threat to create tension paired with a reliable safeguard. Casual use spaces, such as the one at Fort C.F. Smith, give you the sense of prospect. So there's this unimpeded view over the distance. And we have evolved over many, many years looking over our horizon. And so we naturally gravitate towards places like this. Other examples can be balconies, oversized windows, mezzanine levels, open plan spaces, or transparent partitions. And finally, refuge. So here you are, similar to Prospect, you're focusing on being inside of a protected room and looking out around your surroundings, but you're safe inside, away from all of the buzz of the urban environment. So moving to biophilic implementation. So we learned a little bit about biophilic design, but how do you actually implement it? And so I mentioned that it's not just about the design itself, it's about the access. And it's also about programming the space. And so as we move towards implementing this in Arlington, we need to be thinking in those types of categories as well. On December 18th, the county board passed a resolution to express interest in joining the Biophilic City Network. And that is the first step that needs to be taken in order for us to apply to become a biophilic city. There are two other elements that we need to complete. One is a narrative statement expressing our goals and aspirations to be a partner city, and then also to identify 5 municipal indicators, which will help us track our progress. And within those indicators, we have a series of metrics that we will use to specifically measure that. And we will be required to update and share that information with the network on an annual basis. So the 5 municipal indicators were also contained in the resolution, which has been shared with you, I believe. And here they are. And certainly we can talk more about these, but the idea was that we would focus on both governance and planning, the actual conditions, projects that integrate nature into the built environment, looking at finding ways to make sure that everyone has access to that nature, and also engaging the community and programming our spaces accordingly. So what does this mean for Arlington? So we are going to indicate our interest for joining the Biophilic City Network, and then the real work begins. So we have to apply these principles to our future policies and practices and help to influence the work done in both public and private spaces, and adapt our processes accordingly, and then create programming to enliven the spaces and to connect people with the great resources we have in Arlington. So with that, concludes our presentation, and we're happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fioretti. Would the commissions like to weigh in on this or add anything at this time? Commissioner Haynes.
Thank you very much, and we appreciate you taking this as an information item. We feel like this is a great kickoff for the new year, especially with Chair Guerin having been extremely familiar with this, having taught a class on biophilic communities at GW. So we feel like this is a great time to be doing this, especially with all the projects that we have coming forward, that we really need to do this now. And so we really are looking for the Planning Commission to get engaged in this, and we just feel like this is a tremendous opportunity, and things are going to be moving fast and furious. So the more that we are all moving in the same direction, we're looking forward to that. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Howell?
Nobody needs to tell any of you that your workload is heavy, and there's lots going on in Arlington, and this is kind of a change point, paradigm shift for how we look at how we're doing our business in Arlington, how we treat our land, how we understand our space, how we create a habitat for our own families and our own children and future residents, and not continue on a path that becomes irretrievable because, not just because of loss of open space, which we've been protecting, but also the lack of taking advantage of what we can do with our built space. And I think that's where you wouldn't get much argument in Arlington about saving our parks and that kind of thing. There are signs all over the place. The personal connection that biophilia establishes between humans and their spaces and nature is a singular motivating point for many, many residents who otherwise are sentimentally for environmental protection, but now they see a daily personal benefit from this. So as this becomes more broadly understood, I think you're going to see a lot of support for the kinds of things that many commissions have been pushing for in terms of building right. And this is largely, in Arlington, largely about what we do with our built environment and how we make it as natureful as possible, and perhaps even how we do it so cleverly that we're actually giving back some open space even as we develop.
Thank you. So colleagues, this is an opportunity for us to share comments and questions about this. Commissioner Morton.
First of all, thank you for a really fascinating report. I knew a little bit about it before, and now I know 10 times as much, so thanks. I'm just wondering, colleagues and staff and fellow commissioners, what is the logical way that we would move forward and incorporate this into, for example, the SPRC process or something else, in the absence of maybe having a formal adopted policy? Are there indices other cities have used or other kinds of procedures?
Mr. Duffy?
Commissioners, good evening, and thank you, Commissioner Morton, for your question. As you heard tonight, there's been really some outstanding work on this, and I encourage everyone to read the Biophilic Arlington report that David and many others who are here tonight have prepared. I think it really expresses how important this is for Arlington today. And it will, with the adoption of the Public Spaces Master Plan, entering the biophilic network, it will require us to rethink. And I think David expressed it as a new paradigm, but we will be required to rethink how we can introduce these principles into our development review processes and to our planning processes as well, whether they be short or long range. So the Planning Division is going to be prepared to do that. We're going to be an active partner with DPR and DES as we move into the biophilic network. And again, this is essential for Arlington to do. I think one of the things that impresses me is that while there certainly is work that we can do in our site plan review process and our various conditions and design review processes to ensure that we embrace this, in large part, there are opportunities for all of Arlington residents to engage and to make a difference in these urban natural areas that are beginning to shrink through urbanization. And again, I think everyone in the community will certainly have a role in ensuring that we achieve these important objectives that you've heard tonight. But from a planning standpoint, this is a clear part of our comprehensive plan, and it will be reflected in the policies, more detailed planning work, and certainly the site plan review work that we do in the future. So when we begin to discuss our conditions for standard site plans and other work that we do, this will have to be front and center.
Thank you, Mr. Duffy. Indeed, Commissioner Morton, we have started to raise this, some of us ourselves and also some of the other commissioners that participate in SPRC at some of our recent project meetings, and we've seen some really nice aspects of biophilia incorporated into both the artist development and the Keybridge Marriott, the buildings to the east. Commissioner Schroll, then Commissioner Steinberger.
Thank you, staff, for the presentation, and Mr. Duffy, thank you for that explanation. Something I was going to ask about. I was wondering, in staff's work, what conversations you've had with NAIOP about what's going on. As our chair noted, we are asking more of applicants, and it's encouraging to hear that staff is going to be developing some more policies, but I'd just be interested if you could speak briefly to what conversations staff have had with the development community on this.
We're going to have to continue to engage with all of our public and private partners in the planning and development. So that'll be front and center. One thing that I want to note that we're proposing to include in our work program this year, and this will be more than a one-year effort, but it's time that we review our landscaping standards. And it's been proposed for quite some time. And our landscape architecture staff, working with the urban forester and our DS staff, I think this is one of the major efforts that we can proceed to ensure that how we approach landscaping whether it's related to site plans or every aspect of permitting, that it can also address and embrace the biophilic principles that have been discussed tonight. So I think there are a number of other different regulatory things that we can do, but I think it's timely for us to update our landscape standards. And Chris Kreider and Brett Wallace and our staff have already begun to think about how to do that, and we'll discuss that further with the Planning Commission and the County Board when we take up our work program for 2020.
That's helpful. It's encouraging to hear that the landscape standards are being looked at. Another thing to maybe consider as you're doing that, there are some zoning categories that require landscaping, like RC requires that, but it does not specify that it necessarily has to be at grade. And so that might be something for staff to look at. You know, there may be arguments for it not to be a grade, but I know that neighbors are generally asking for it to be there, and as we're kind of pushing for more kind of access to it from a neighborhood perspective and a broader perspective, might be something else to consider as staff's putting together its work plan.
And my hope is that we look at this comprehensively, and this is the time to do that.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Schroll. Commissioner Steinberger and then Commissioner Lantelmi.
I just wanted to, I guess maybe it's a reiteration at this point that I think some of the values that we've heard tonight in terms of a more biophilic principled Arlington are already things we're seeing in some of the other actions that have been reviewed by this body and, you know, from us to the county board in terms of the public spaces master plan, where we've talked about kind of casual use space. And in several of the SPRCs that I've attended or led recently, that has been something that has come up. And so it is, I think, part of it is about kind of having those conversations and holding ourselves accountable and kind of raising those as even without or before Arlington has kind of a formal position on this or has a formal adoption, as it were, because it sounds like things are going in that direction. That's another opportunity where we can kind of still see those values. And really, it's a continuation of the values that I think a lot of us are already seeing both within this body and Arlington as a whole. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Steinberger. Commissioner Lantelmi, then Commissioner Siegel.
Yeah, I was wondering also whether, of course, we have LEED as one of our criteria for evaluating projects under SPRC. I'd like to know more, and it doesn't have to be here, but how does LEED, are there any inconsistencies between our LEED requirements and biophilia? Or are they fully complementary, which I hope they would be, or think that they would be, but is that in fact true? There are a lot of things that already in our site plan processes that do seem to fit very naturally with biophilia. We are always asking about those, but maybe we need to sort of almost asterisk them as, you know, this is, check the box, this is how these work, and then encourage those even further. A couple other things. We have a lot of county-owned odd lots, little, you know, traffic circles, things like that, where we have lawns. And I see occasionally that they get converted into rain gardens. But we have lots of medians all through the county. We have all sorts of these odd lots that are county property that would seem to lend themselves to biophilic treatments rather than just having the lawn that has to get mowed every month or so. Do we have an inventory of those? You know, do we know where they are that we could start using them? They're small, they're often overlooked, but they probably add up to literally acres of property that we could then be using, apply these principles to. And they're very visible that way. And finally, have we done an ordinance review in that, are there any ordinances that would be counter to this? For example, do we have and I'm ignorant on this, do we have any standards that require lawns to be mowed to a certain height? Yes. Or over a certain amount of time, or that there have to be lawns rather than other type of treatments? If we have any of those type of ordinances, this is probably the opportunity to go through, look at them, and change them so they do end up being more biophilic rather than what used to be considered to be, you know, the perfect landscape, which is the perfect lawn. So those are my comments.
Those are great comments, Commissioner Lantelmi. Would staff like to respond to any of that? Yours.
We have lots of comments.
Yes.
So thank you very much for your thoughtful comments. And Yes, in many cases, the biophilic design is complementary to LEED. And in fact, some of the metrics that we are looking to identify under the indicators that we showed as part of the presentation have those connections, and we can get back to you with those metrics with some more detail. Second piece, with regards to county-owned lots, I can speak from the Department of Parks and Recreation's perspective that we do have an inventory of all landscaped areas that we manage within the park system. And so that is something that we can look at. Now, going back to these metrics that I was referring to, we're looking at ways to accomplish multiple county goals, not just a Parks and Recreation goal or planning or so on. And so, as Mr. Duffy had mentioned, this is an interdepartmental effort just to get to this point, not to mention working with the commissioners as well. And so in many cases, we are looking at ways to address stormwater needs, for example, and beautify the community, create those natural connections and so on. And so that's just one example. We have many more. And then finally, with regards to ordinances, I will turn it over to Mr. Duffy.
I believe that related to our LEED related standards that are traditionally been part of our site plan work, the commission will hear from DES staff about, I think, future direction that staff will want to take in that area. In fact, someone mentioned NAOP before. I believe our staff is going to be before NAOP discussing some major policy shifts and changes in that area that I think, again, is so central to what you've heard tonight. So a number of moving parts, but they're all integrated and so important to this effort. One other project I think that it's important to understand, and we talk about the public spaces, those small spaces, but the commission knows that over many years, through the actions you've recommended to the county board, we've created a wide array of private public spaces in our metro corridors. And one of the great recommendations from the Public Spaces Master Plan is to be better stewards of those spaces. And as you know, I believe you know that Chris Kreider and his team, working with DPR, have prepared an inventory of much of that and also some initial assessments of those spaces. The biophilic work will provide us with an opportunity to advance some guidelines or some actions that the owners of those spaces may be able to consider and take over time as well. So again, that's going to be an important part of our work program. It has been part of our work program, but we need to complete that in 2020, and that's our goal.
Thank you. Commissioner Haynes, did you wish to weigh in on part of this?
I did. I just specifically on the ordinance, and I think to follow on with Mr. Duffy's comments about it's not just the county that we're looking to get involved in this and that individuals really can make a difference as well. As part of the Northern Virginia Regional Commission, we did a survey. I was involved in this, I think it was almost 2 years ago now, where we looked at all the member jurisdictions and what their weed ordinances were, because we will have this issue where people will do a native plant garden and then a neighbor might complain and they come in and mow it down. And so what we found in looking at all the different jurisdictions is that there was different constructs for the different, each jurisdiction had its own methodology. And so what we landed on instead was focusing specifically on the definition of a weed. And so we do have that model language. It was adopted or sort of blessed, I guess, by the Northern Virginia Regional Commission. We've not made a full-on push here yet in Arlington, but I definitely think that could be something we could do. And it furthers that sense that we all can do something here. It's not just the county, it's not just developers, it's individual homeowners and property owners that can take a lot of these steps.
Great, and sort of along the lines of that, if I tend to like incentives rather than punishments, if we could have some sort of like program, for example, and maybe we even have this and I'm just not aware of it, which means it should be publicized more, but for individual homeowners, let's say, or small lot owners, if we had something that Arlington certified organic property, that this is a property where there are no herbicides or pesticides being used whatsoever, and native plants are being encouraged, or invasives are being removed. Or, and it's part of the we have habitat, we're creating habitats. And I know there are things like that, but if we could even create a little sign that somebody could put on their front lawn or on their front of their house that says, we're part of this program, it encourages people to do it. It's a nice thing that people can look at, and it sort of can spread that they have it, maybe I should have it too. What's this about?
If only, Commissioner Land, tell me. Commissioner Haynes, do you want to talk about Audubon at Home?
Well, actually, Chair Guerin and I are both involved in a program called Audubon at Home Backyard Habitats, and essentially it's that. And it's, if you create these habitats, what indicator species are coming to use it. So it's both creating these spaces that you remove invasives, you're adding native plants, you're having a water source, you're getting rid of pesticides and insecticides and all of that. And then the next step really is, a lot of these programs are very complementary, but this one in particular encourages people to get out in their yards and see what's using it. And that connection, again, really goes to the heart of the biophilic community, because we're really encouraging people to get out there and look and see, document what's there. And it is so cool to see people just get so excited about what's in their yard. But you can get certified, and then you get a sign that says this is what you're doing. And it's we also have a thing about cues to care, to make sure people are doing it in such a way that it doesn't just look weedy, but it looks very intentional, and that there's a purpose to it.
Thank you. For my part, I will go ahead and send that link to my colleagues. Commissioner Siegel and then Commissioner Peterson.
I think the good news with all of this is that there is a paradigm shift occurring in the public at large. That's how paradigms shift. They are not imposed, but they well up. And just to point out one example, the livability agenda that the 3 civic associations put together for 22202 include a concern about a heat island and a concern about linking spaces and creating more habitat room for wildlife and other creatures. So that's a good example of that, and that's the good news. I think the challenge, and I know Mr. Duffy is on that challenge, and staff will be on the challenge, and I'm delighted to hear about an inter-shop work on this. I think that really is the key to dynamic, smart government. But the challenge, for example, I had a word with Commissioner Haynes about the PSMP and the addendum that concerns privately owned, publicly eased spaces. So I just read to you real quickly. Planning and layout, access and circulation, user comfort, landscaping, amenities, signage. Those are categories that we normally think in terms of. And so it would be good to take those terms that I think are now in the Public Spaces Master Plan and flesh them out, build them out a little bit more. Luckily, in the past couple of months, we've had 2 builders who are really into this, really hip builders, it seems, artists, and also the Marriott buildings. So we'll get that, then we'll have examples. And I think the more we talk about it and think about it and plan for it, the better. But it's very exciting.
Thank you, Commissioner Siegel. Commissioner Peterson, then Commissioner Hughes, then Commissioner Morton.
I agree. This is a very exciting project that we're looking at, which aligns nicely with Arlington's values. So I look forward to hearing more about it. When we do bring it up again, more for discussing Arlington actually possibly joining as a partner in this project, I'd be interested to know kind of what we're thinking about strategy-wise about how to split the responsibility of meeting our requirements for the project between like how much of it would be coming onto the departments and their operating budgets every year, how much would be coming out of the CIP, how much would be kind of looking at residents to proactively taking this on just to kind of do something interesting, how much of it might be funding that we'd be offering residents, and how much might be applicants offering community benefits. So how we're kind of looking at achieving that so that when we look at it, when the county board looks at it, we kind of got an idea of what it would look like cost-wise. But it looks like a great project.
Thank you. Commissioner Hughes and Commissioner Morton?
Thank you. Kind of piggybacking on Commissioner Peterson's, I hope as staff develops the monitor and reporting of these indicators, that we create for ourselves objective measures of success. Too often I feel like it's a wishy-washy sort of objective measure that we could always find a way to be successful at. Sometimes it's important to set a goalpost that may be realistic, may be a stretch, it may be something you think is easy putt, and you fail at it, so you know how you've done. I think too often in our processes, we leave ourselves the ability to succeed without the ability to measure a failure. And I think we should try to be more proactive in establishing objective measures. And this is certainly an example. And of course, I would want objective measures for the county, for our community members who can join. So it's not always has to be money spent and dollars out the door, but also about things that the community could do that we could measure objectively. And so I encourage staff to establish objective measures, even if they are stretch goals or unfunded goals. That way we can know when we succeed and when we fail.
Thank you, Commissioner Hughes. I'm just going to go quickly because we have things to get through, but I want you to know that Ms. Fioretti has worked on precisely that idea, the idea of where we are, where we can go, and the stretch goals. Commissioner Morton?
Thank you. In reading through here, the very helpful material that you prepared, obviously there's a lot about wildlife. It made me think about dogs and dog parks. I imagine this has come up in other places. I'm just wondering, how does that in general fit in? Because it comes up all the time, in the projects that we see. Are there better, dog parks that are more biophilic than others, or when, again, you're talking about getting community benefits and there's some accommodation for dogs? You don't have to tell me like the complete answer now, but it would be interesting to me to have a sense, given that this is a priority of, is this something people are thinking about? How do you accommodate dogs in a more biophilic way than previously? Thanks.
So I'll answer that one. Good evening. So we have been exploring that as part of this exercise to understand, for us to get a better knowledge and understanding of biophilic design principles and everything. So we have been, on the DPR side, we have been researching a lot what does this really mean for our parks and dog parks including, because we do have some uses that could be perceived as conflicting. But there are great examples of the dog parks that are more environmentally sustainable, depending materials that they use, the planting that's around them. So dog park doesn't have to be just the plain fenced-off area for dogs and their owners, but it could be much more biophilic. So we are going to continue to explore all of these design elements and what do they really mean for us in the future.
Thank you, Commissioner Morton and Ms. Lasek. In order to keep things moving along, I want to thank staff and thank my colleagues for a very thoughtful discussion on an issue that's close to me, and also ask for staff to consider giving us an update as they move further along with this and as our schedule permits. Were there any final words on this? Okay, thank you very much. Oh, Commissioner Siegel.
I was just wondering very quickly, can we encourage the bids to have like a committee, a biophilic committee? I wonder if the county has any sway. I would think that the Crystal City bid, Pentagon City bid will be encouraged by the neighborhoods to do this, but I just thought I'd throw that out. I don't know whether the county has the capacity, ability, or the legal authority to, I guess it's not legal authority, it's just the sort of encouragement.
Well, as the commission knows, annually the county board considers the work programs and budgets for each of our business improvement districts. And now that this is a major part of our policies and planning efforts, I assume ultimately this will be integral to some of their work as well.
Thank you, Mr. Duffy. Thank you, colleagues. And thank you, Ms. Fioretti, Ms. Lasek, Mr. Duffy. Thank you, Commissioner Haynes and Commissioner Howell. With that, I think we're ready to move on to organizational matters. Is there a motion for approval of the minutes? Yes, Ms. Steinberger.
I had one change.
Yes.
Sorry, I have to find it. In the minutes from Wednesday, December 4th, on page 3, it should say, on like fourth paragraph from the bottom, it should be cite. It's a typo.
Thank you. Any other corrections? Commissioner Hughes?
Thank you, Commissioner Guerin. I'd like the record to reflect that on the Monday, December the 2nd, that I was not absent, and instead I recused myself from consideration as reflected from my letter sent to the clerk prior to the beginning of that meeting.
Thank you. Any other corrections?
Making sure the record's got it.
With those changes, may I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Madam Chair, I move the adoption of the meeting minutes from the Planning Commission meeting dated Monday, December 2nd, 2019.
Second?
I'll second.
Motion by Commissioner Schroll, seconded by Commissioner Lantelmi. Any discussion? With none, all in favor? With Commissioner Hughes abstaining? Indeed, thank you. May I have a motion to approve the minutes for Wednesday, December 4th?
Madam Chair, I move the adoption of the meeting minutes from the Planning Commission meeting dated Wednesday, December 4th, 2019.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Schroll, seconded by Commissioner Hughes. Any discussion? All in favor? Unanimous? Thank you.
All right, Madam Chair, I move adoption of the meeting minutes from the Planning Commission meeting dated Thursday, December 5th, 2019.
Second.
A motion made by Commissioner Schroll, seconded by Commissioner Hughes. Any discussion? All in favor? Thank you. And those who were absent will abstain from this vote. Thank you. Excellent. Minutes have been approved. We are ready for a staff report, Mr. Duffy.
Well, good evening again, Madam Chair and members of the Planning Commission. As you may recall, the agenda has included in the past a report from staff and discussing the year ahead with the incoming chair and vice chair. We're going to renew this and very faithfully be here at your meetings to provide you with a report on a monthly basis. So I'm looking forward to that. And I have some things to briefly report on tonight. But before I do that, I want to congratulate Commissioner Guerin and Commissioner Lantelmi on your new roles as chair and vice chair, respectively. And again, Mr. Scholl, the opportunity for staff to work with you last year, you made a difference. And we look forward to continuing that working relationship with the new chair and vice chair. We have some important work ahead of us that we'll talk about when we go over our work program shortly. But again, congratulations to all of you. I'd also like to take a moment tonight to recognize really the difference in the important work that Nancy Giacomini did for, and continues to do in many ways, for Arlington County. As you know, this was Commissioner Giacomini's last term, and she had the opportunity to work with many of you over many years, and many in the community, and certainly with staff. And we'll miss her. Again, from my perspective, she made a difference and is really what Arlington's commitment to citizen planning is all about. And again, congratulations to former Commissioner Giacomini in this new chapter of her work with Arlington County. So several just brief updates. And I asked staff to put up on the screen, I think, an important resource that we created a number of years ago for the Planning Commission, other boards and commissions in the community. But we have a web page that we've called Planning Resources. In a sense, it's a library of a wide range of presentations, information about some of the basic work that you do that underpins the planning work that you're charged with doing in your role as a planning commissioner. And for example, there are various presentations that deal with the community benefit process, the site plan special exception review process, and we have some general presentations that cover a wide range of efforts from site plan to comprehensive planning. So I would encourage all the commission members, particularly some of those who have just joined the commission, to take advantage of these links and this web page. And so I just wanted to bring that up tonight. The second thing that I know we've talked to the chair and vice chair is about, your staff is going to stand ready to meet with you if we can provide sort of one-on-one assistance and development of your role as planning commissioner on a number of different fronts. And so that's going to continue to be a priority for us over the coming year. And I hope you'll take advantage of that offer from staff to meet with you either as a single member or two members to have some development-related work on a number of these presentations we put together. So please take advantage of it. Please let the chair know, or let Giselle or myself know if you'd like to take advantage with that, and we will certainly be there to assist you. Our work program. The commissioners know every year we present our work program in a draft form to the county manager, the county board, the planning commissioner. I understand that the county manager's office is working with the county board office and the clerk to schedule a work session with the planning commission, hopefully in February, and it'll provide an opportunity for staff to present the year ahead and some of the accomplishments over this past year. So we're going to look forward to that. We're in the process of preparing that presentation. And at some point, as we get nearer to a date when it's selected for the work session, we'll get that out to you in advance so that you can have a chance to review it and give us any questions that we may want to consider in preparation for the work session. And I know that the chair and the county board chair will be working on an agenda for that work session. There are a couple of important, there's an important LRPC meeting coming up, I believe on January the 22nd, where staff from housing and from planning will have an opportunity to go over with the Planning Commission the missing middle work program and approach that we're taking. And I believe we've settled on that date on January 22nd. In addition to that, we're also going to provide a presentation on the Pentagon City PDSP update in terms of the scope process and where we stand with that. And Matt Matuzik, who's here tonight, will be there to give you that update. We're very close to taking some important steps on that work, and I think on the 22nd, we'll be able to give the commissioners a good update on where we are. So just a couple of, just a look ahead at some meetings that are coming up and some work that we have, and I look forward to continuing to provide these updates to you on a regular basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Duffy. I think this is going to be very helpful for us going forward. Thank you for articulating what a lot of us are feeling about missing Commissioner Giacomini tonight, and for outlining what's going forward. So I think with that, we can move on to our committee reports. I want to, before we go into those, take my prerogative as chair and introduce a new approach with regard to our responsibility in leading our Planning Commission processes, SPRC, LRPC, and ZOCO. This approach is evolving from our SPRC working group, and we'll hear more about this from Commissioner Schroll, who's been chairing that at a subsequent PC meeting. We're really not done with it, but one idea that came out of it is still in draft form, and we're going to be piloting it, and it's part of our effort to continue to increase our collegiality and our professionalism going forward, and to acknowledge the constraints on our time and on staff's time, and to ensure our attendance at meetings. Some meetings, there's a lot of us, and some meetings, there's not very many of us at all. So here it is. We're looking for approximately 5 PC members to attend all of our meetings, not the same meetings. We're going to try this with a sign-up format. We have many, many meetings that are coming before us, and it's not possible for all of us to attend all of these meetings. Our schedules, family work, is just going to prohibit this. Years ago, Planning Commission was composed largely of mostly retired folks, and they had also a lesser work schedule. So, it's sort of like a perfect storm in terms of needing to do something a bit different. There's been concern over our high levels of attendance at some meetings, and it's something that came out at our SPRC working group. When we talk about sometimes our meetings are inefficient, there's a lot of people around the table, sometimes that's a lot of us. And I don't think that while we all bring something different to the table, I think we can rely on each other to represent some of the issues we raise as well. And again, occasionally we have too little attendance. And also, it's an issue of agency. One goal going forward is to share responsibility among more of us, essentially taking turns, taking the lead on key issues and projects. And those who are chairing and co-chairing these will then have some greater responsibility. They'll be leading these public meetings and preparing reports for us, for our public hearings, and leading discussions at these hearings. And the rest of us, in turn, can rely on these chairs and the other meeting attendees for their expertise with regard to an individual project or proposal. Lest you be worried that this means you will be left out, if you haven't already looked at a list of the projects that are coming before us, the scope of it's enormous. There's so much coming. There will be plenty for everyone to do. So our discussions at our hearings hopefully will then be more focused on the outstanding issues that are raised throughout the public meeting processes, and less so on either issues that have already been resolved or on issues that are interesting but somewhat less relevant to the overall project coming forward. So in the absence of an existing sign-up format, I want to share what I've started just for this month. And this is, again, a pilot effort. Those of us in this working group have discussed this. We're thinking month to month, we will have a list of the upcoming meetings, sort of an excerpt of what Ms. Johnson prepares for us. This way, this can accommodate our schedules. If you're traveling, that's a poor month for you to sign up for a lot of things. Or if you're having a baby. But there might be times when you think, wow, I have a pretty easy schedule. I'd like to go to a lot of meetings, or I'd really like to follow up on this. So that's the idea here. This isn't to say that you can't attend as many meetings as you like, but we're going to try this directed participation model going forward. And next month, we'll either pass this around at the beginning of the meeting, or Commissioner Morton suggested exploring Google Docs. And we heard from Mr. McIsaac that that might indeed be feasible. And that way, that would be something that's online. We'd all be able to see who has signed up for what. Please be respectful and do not sign up for every meeting, recognizing that we are a team and everyone will have an opportunity to contribute. But right now, what I'd like to do is pass this around. You'll see that there are 7 meetings for which we need our collective identification of attendance between now and the next PC meeting. There's an LRPC meeting on the special GLUP. There's an LRPC meeting on missing middle and the PDSP. There's an SPRC meeting on the Randolph Street Hotel concept. There's an SPRC on 11th and Vermont. There's an SPRC on Key Marriott. There's an SPRC on Park Arlington. And then there's the ZOCO meetings. So I've already written in who I know is either chairing or co-chairing, and then I've put numbers next to it. Please feel free to put your name down for these, and then we'll have a sense of where we still need to know that people are attending. Again, it's a pilot effort. We're going to try this and hopefully make things easier and more efficient for all of us. Commissioner Scholl, did you want to say anything more about this since you led this effort?
Just that I think you articulated the rationale for this really well. The other update is we were intending to have had a meeting this past week. I, up until 2 p.m. of that day, was still thinking I was going to fly to Phoenix. And so, although I didn't have to go, ultimately, we canceled that site plan working group meeting. So we were going to have, I think, a more fulsome discussion about some of the things I we all articulated last month. We have yet to do that. So Ms. Johnson is trying to find a new date for us to have a meeting where we can bring together some of the items that we discussed at our previous meetings. I'm working on a memo that outlines the process, our recommendations, one of which our chair just walked through. And then that's going to come to you all for discussion about SPRC membership more broadly. We were not going to take any action on that without having some vote of recommendation by the full PC. So stay tuned. That's kind of where we are. And as always, this is a subcommittee that a number of folks here are participating in, but if you are free and want to come, it's an open meeting, and we welcome your feedback as well. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So this list is going around. If there's something you really want to go to and we're all already signed up, that's fine this time around. We're trying this out. With that, we will go into our committee reports. I'm really pleased to share with you that Commissioner Morton has agreed to be the SPRC chair for 2020. Commissioner Morton, do you have anything you want to say about SPRC going forward? Okay, thank you. Commissioner Schroll is going to be our LRPC chair going forward. Commissioner Schroll, do you have anything you'd like to share?
So Mr. Duffy mentioned we are having a meeting next week on the 22nd. He mentioned both the missing middle and the Pentagon City PDSP. So just a little bit more on the missing middle. Staff is intending on roughly a 18-month process that will include ultimately, I think, a working group. At the conclusion of that, there will be, at least what we're thinking now, probably some zoning ordinance amendments that will come out at the end of 2021 that are going to go to the board that might kind of move into 2022. We'll see. So we're going to have a discussion with staff in a few weeks about just the beginning of that process and getting kind of an update there. The day before that, we have a LRPC on the special GLUP study for Shirlington. That's going to be held at Shirlington Library. So please come to that. And that's it for January LRPC. Do you want
to? Sure.
Recognize Zoko.
Who?
It's Daniel. You're standing in as vice chair.
Vice chair. Who? Yeah. Who's Devanshi?
No, it's Daniel.
Oh, Daniel. Oh, for Zoko. Fill us in, please. Thank you.
Thank you. I am excited to be working on this again next year. There is not a lot of action in January, February, or March. That's a function of where the staff is in the work plan. And we will probably be looking at the zoning committee and zoning ordinance work plan in the next few months as it comes into focus. So stay tuned.
Thank you very much. And Commissioner Weir, is Commissioner Patel planning to work with you on ZOCO this year?
I was not going to be outing Commissioner Patel, but that is, but she has agreed to co-chair the zoning committee, and as that work plan starts to come into focus, then she and I will be sort of picking which projects we're going to be shepherding between the two
That's
of us.
excellent, and I really appreciate you doing it that way. You know, Commissioner Weir and I sort of co-chaired ZOCO for a year as well. I think it helps with the overlap. ZOCO can be very complicated and requires someone to focus on it long-term, so thank you.
PFRC.
Yes.
PFRC.
Did you already
Yes, we do. We have a Career Center meeting coming up on Wednesday, the continuing saga of every other week having meetings on the Career Center. That will be continuing on into May. I think I mentioned at the last meeting that we have essentially wrapped up Fire Station 8. We'll probably have one more meeting as the architects get to the final renderings, drafting of what that will look like. But the community is very, very pleased with that with the plans to date on it. It's been reported to the county board. The county board was quite pleased with how it is turning out, and we're optimistic that that will wrap up with one more meeting sometime this year.
Thank you. And to clarify, Commissioner Lantelmi will be the chair of PFRC this year. And your other members?
Right now, we have Commissioner Steinberger and we have Commissioner Peterson. Of course, we will have some issues on attendance coming up with that, so we'll probably have to figure out how that will work out best. But I do want to thank former Commissioner McSweeney for her service for the past year on it. Now, she fortunately will continue on as a JFAC member, so we'll probably still see her at the same meetings, just wearing a different hat.
Indeed. Okay. Thank you. And Commissioner Hughes will be continuing as Form-Based Code Advisory Working Group Chair. Do you have a report for us?
Yes, I do, Madam Chair. Just fellow commissioners, this year you will probably only have one use permit to hear with respect to the form-based code. The Greenbrier Apartments at the west end of Columbia Pike will come in with a market rate development within the neighborhood's form-based code. You'll also possibly hear some zoning ordinance or implementation plan changes to the earlier in the year with respect to the final implementation of ownership affordable housing within the neighborhoods and commercial form-based code, and some of the challenges that both were laid down by the AUG years ago, and that housing staff, I think, is now finally working to address. And unlikely for this year, but possible, would be the Fillmore Garden AUG proposal with respect to the mirror image, I'll call it, of the Penrose Square Plaza, but not including the beautiful historic Art Deco building at the corner of Walter Reed and Columbia Pike, since everyone wants to know about that.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Hughes. And so I just want to say one last thing, how delighted I am to be working with all of you this very busy year and gratified by your support for my leadership. And so we'll move on to the organization of the Commission for 2020 and related matters. The first thing we need to do is adopt our Planning Commission schedule for 2020. Madam Clerk, this is the item. Do I have a motion?
Yeah, Madam Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Scholl.
I do have one edit on it. So bottom right corner says Friday, January 1st, 2019.
Wow, gee.
Says 2020.
Oh.
So with that edit, I would.
2021?
2021, there you go. Edit, you're not far enough in the future. So with that, I move adoption of the Planning Commission meeting schedule for 2020.
I'll second that.
Is there any discussion, Commissioner Steinberger?
I just have a question. Why are certain things highlighted in yellow?
May I?
Yes, please, Madam Clerk.
Okay. These dates are highlighted in yellow because they include a Tuesday date versus a Monday and a Wednesday.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good question, thank you. So motion to adopt was made by Commissioner Schroll and seconded by Commissioner Lantelmi? Did I get that correct? Any other discussion? Okay, we're ready for a vote. All in favor of this calendar? That's unanimous, thank you. The next thing we need to do is our PC reps for the 2020 county board meetings. I will be passing this around. Note that the county board meetings are on Saturdays, occasionally an item for which we have prepared an advisory letter or comment will also be held on a Tuesday. So when you look at this calendar, please be aware of both the Saturday and the Tuesday dates. My name is automatically put in for January. And so when you look at this, remember that when it's your month to prepare to present to the board, you will be bringing the letters that everyone worked on for our hearing that month. It might not be something about which you are especially most well informed, and those folks can come with you if you wish, or you can confer with them to be best prepared. That's also the month for which you bring snacks. So I will be passing this around. I'll go in this direction this time. Please fill in your name. If you can't find a date that works for you, we can work on scheduling. And also, we recognize that things come up. Someone can cover for you if necessary. All right. The last thing we need to do is we have two more things? Oh, thanks. Is that the last one? Is that last or is this last? Okay,
We're going to do the report last.
we do the report last. Okay,
Yeah,
thank
and
you.
we'll go ahead and start on the liaison assignment.
Yeah, we'll start on the liaison assignments. These are for 2020, and they are meant to be, you're meant to liaise. So if possible, you attend these meetings, but planning commission meetings take precedence. We certainly encourage you, if you can't attend the meeting, you can establish some sort of rapport with the chair, with the staff, to be informed about what's going on and relay back to us any issues about which we would like to know, and also weigh in with the planning commission opinion on some of these. We assign these in order of seniority. So please pull out your liaison assignments for 2020, and we will go in order of seniority, and this is the order of seniority. We go Jane, Stephen, James, me, Jim, Daniel, Elizabeth, Devanshi, Sarah, Nia, Tenley. Tenley has given me her choices if something is left when it's her turn, and so we will do our best. I'm sorry? Yes, we do alpha order for people who are appointed on the same day, which is how Stephen crept ahead of James. Okay, and I think Devanshi ahead of Sarah. Okay, so with that, Commissioner Siegel, what is your first choice?
Well, I'll just note that there are appointments, pre-appointments already made by county board or county manager. So I just point that out. I think I don't know how active they are, but the Arlington-Alexandria Joint 4-Mile Run Task Force. I think with biophilia coming
Yes.
up, that might be good.
And you did that last year as well, so it's a nice continuity. Excellent, thank you. Commissioner Hughes?
The Columbia Pike Revitalization Organization.
Columbia Pike Revitalization Organization, CPRO?
CPRO.
Excellent, thank you. Commissioner Scholl?
Emergency Preparedness Advisory Commission, EPAC.
I'm working on it, Emergency Preparedness Advisory Commission. Thank you. Commissioner Giron, I will take Urban Forestry again. Commissioner Lantelmi?
I will take the, where'd it go? I just saw it. The Lee Highway Alliance,
Getting to that.
page 4.
Yes, and again, some continuity. Commissioner Ware?
A NAOP.
Excellent, wow, we're getting a lot of continuity. Commissioner Morton?
I'll take NCPC,
I'm sorry, can you say it again?
National Capital Planning Commission.
Yes, thank you. Commissioner Patel? Okay.
I'm sorry, which one?
Economic Development Commission. Commissioner Steinberger?
HALRB.
Commissioner Steinberger, HLRB. All right. Commissioner Bagley? Okay,
JFAC.
JFAC, okay. That was Commissioner Peterson's first choice. Her second choice was housing, and I think that's still available. Okay, excellent. So Commissioner Bagley will take JFAC, and Commissioner Peterson will take housing. Okay, so now we start all over again. Commissioner Siegel, second choice.
So I think I'll take E2C2.
Excellent. E2C2 for Commissioner Siegel. Commissioner Hughes?
Bicycle Advisory Committee.
Okay. Bicycle Advisory Committee. Commissioner Schroll?
I'm going to pass.
Oh. You can do that.
Yes, you can.
Yes, you can. You can. You can. Hang on, I didn't get a chance to look at this. Commissioner Giron, I will take Crystal City bid. Commissioner Lantelmi?
I'm going to pass.
Okay. Commissioner Weir?
I'll be passing.
Uh-oh. Oh, dear. Commissioner Morton?
I'll take the Arts Commission.
Excellent. Commissioner Patel? Okay. Commissioner Steinberger?
Did someone already take Ballston bid?
No, they did
I'll
not.
take Ballston bid. Thank
Okay.
you.
Excellent. Great. For 500. Commissioner Bagley? What's left is
Lots.
quite a bit.
Lots.
So what's left is Clarendon Alliance, NCAC, Park and Rec, Pedestrian Advisory, Roslyn bid. Indeed.
I picked Boston.
We heard you. So I just
Said
have a
Roslyn.
question.
Roslyn, I said Roslyn. I've got you down for Boston.
So in the event that, your vacation comes up or something like that, you can go, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, very good. Okay.
Often it's very difficult for us to attend the other commission meetings because they conflict with some of our own.
Right,
But
exactly.
you reach out and make sure that they
Right.
understand what's going on. Did you have one that you'd like to liaise to?
Parks and Rec.
Excellent, thank you. And Commissioner Peterson, I can't remember if she, all right, we'll just leave that then. And then we'll go through one more time. What's left is Clarendon Alliance, NCAC, Pedestrian Advisory, Roslyn bid. Commissioner Siegel, are you interested in any of those?
I think I'll pass. I feel like I've kind of got enough on my plate.
Okay, Commissioner Hughes, pass. Commissioner Scholl?
I'll do pedestrian advisory.
Oh, great.
Wait, let me just look at.
Second Wednesday of the month?
Okay, that's fine. Yep.
Okay. At the moment, I'm going to pass. Commissioner Lantelmi?
Passing.
Commissioner Weir?
I'm saturated.
Thank you. Commissioner Morton?
I'll do Clarendon Alliance. Can I do it if I live there?
Which one did you say?
Clarendon Alliance?
Yes, you
Clarendon
should do it.
Alliance.
You should do it.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you, because your plate's filling up too. Commissioner Patel? Commissioner Steinberger?
Pass.
Commissioner Bagley? NCAC is left. Roslyn bid is left.
So, Madam Chair, I think since we do have a commissioner who's not here with us, we can maybe leave some of these items and then.
Yes, she had housing, that was her first choice, and we could
Okay.
leave some, and of course, we had some that were vacant last year.
Sure.
So Commissioner Bagley, if you're not,
I'll pass.
okay, you pass, excellent. So we're done with that, thank you very much. Are we adopting this?
Well, so we have some amendments to it.
Okay.
Yeah, report. Madam Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Scholl.
So for the annual report, there are some amendments to it. So, I mean, I don't know if you have some too. So I don't know if staff's okay, maybe holding it over. We could do it next month with the amendments at that point. So I have some that are about, the initial ones are in the first table on the first page. Commissioner Patel's term ending date is incorrect. It should be 1/31/23. And then my other edits are more kind of consistency and grammar on page 2. So we have this list of kind of all the things we considered during the year.
Can you give us a marked up copy?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
I'll happily hand this off to you. But it
Okay.
just, some of them are plural, some of them aren't. It's just kind of that consistency.
Sure, yeah. If anybody has copies that they've marked up, just give them to me and I'll type it up and give you a
Yeah,
fresh one for
absolutely.
next month to look at.
But the other thing I'll say, and that's reflected here in this report, two things. One, we did a ton last year. So thank you for everybody who led a process, whatever it was. Commissioner Lantelmi, you're going to get the award for last year. You led just about everything, it seems. So,
Iron Man.
you're to be commended for all your work. And the other thing that I failed to say earlier is our clerk is to be commended for all her work to make all this work for us. So, and Ms. Badger, thank you for your efforts in filling in as well. We can't do this without you all. So, all right, I think there's others who may have
Thank
some
you. Commissioner
amendments.
Hughes?
I'll provide my comments to staff if we're not going to be reviewing it this evening. I think it's our past practice to discuss our letter and then to normally come back with a final copy we're all happy with in our February meeting, so I'm perfectly fine with that. But I do believe that if we had an Iron Commissioner Award, that it would definitely go to Commissioner Lantomi, and I think that we should
Our
probably get a little
MVP.
medal.
Thank you.
Anyone else? If you do have comments to this, please provide them to Ms. Badger. Okay. With that, again, thank you, staff. Thank you, Ms. Badger. Thank you, Ms. Johnson. And if there's nothing else to discuss, we stand adjourned until February. Yay. Okay.